everybody, this is Diana from So Very Crafty, and we are here today to make these fun little stuffed fabric letters. I have made the word sew here for my sewing room, and they were a fun little project to make, super simple. Today I'm going to show you just exactly how I went about doing this. It is a somewhat of a beginner project. I would say it's a little fidgety, but I think a beginner can tackle this project without too much trouble. All you really need is some fabric and some polyester fiberfill to complete this project. And you'll have to do a little bit of hand sewing, but not too much, and most of it's done on your machine. I hope you enjoyed this project today, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and ding that bell for notifications so that you can get notified of future So Very Crafty videos. So today, we are going to get started on how to make these fun little stuffed 3D, because they are 3D, letter little pillows. You can make them as large or small as you want, depending on the size of your printer. You can go to a Staples or Office Depot and make them really big if you want, or if you're good at drawing, draw a giant letter and you can make these letters as big as you want. So let's get started on just how to make these fun little letters. Now what I did is I cut out the letter D, and I chose this D for a reason. The letters sew, which were perfect for my sewing room, do not have this little cutout in the middle. And I wanted to show you how to go about doing letters like P and D and A. Letters that have a cutout in the middle are a little bit more difficult to do than letters that do not have a cutout in the middle. So I wanted to choose this letter for a reason, and it's also the beginning of my first name, so I thought it would be fun to do. So what I did was I just drew this out, this big letter D, because it's not that hard to do. But you could use your printer, or like I said, go to Staples or Office Depot or one of your local office supply stores and have them print out a giant D for you, or a giant whatever letter you'd like, and you can then get started on this project. So I use this, I love this little, it's actually doctor sheeting on doctors' waiting tables when you're in a doctor's, waiting in a doctor's office. They pull those sheets of paper down. That's what this is. And it makes perfect little pattern pieces, and it's super inexpensive to buy. I'll put a link down in the bottom of my description section below the video here on where you can get this stuff, but it's really inexpensive and it makes great patterns. So I just drew my D, and I cut out 2 D's from my pattern. Now there is something that's really important about this. You will notice that my D's are going in opposite directions. And that comes naturally when you cut the fabric, because the fabric is folded. Generally it's folded with the wrong sides together, and so you will automatically get reverse images of your letters. If you are using just one layer of fabric, you're going to have to cut out one D or one letter going one way and one letter going the opposite direction. So you'll have to flip that pattern over. And the reason being is when you sew these together, you want them to be going the same direction, right sides, when you're finished. So you want to make sure that you do that. The next thing you're going to do is you are going to measure all the way around your letter, and you're going to add 2 inches. You're going to take that measurement and you're going to cut out some contrasting fabric that is 3 inches wide, or however wide you want your gusset. So if you can see on my letter S here, I have used a 3-inch wide gusset on my letter S and on all my sew letters, so that you can really see the contrasting fabric. But you can use 2.5 inches or 2 inches or however many inches you like. But I thought 3 inches was a good amount. So I measured around my D and I cut out my gusset at 2 inches. Now, because we have a inset little hole in our D, I cut out another 3 inches for this D, because you're going to add a little tiny gusset inside this D piece. And when you do that, it's a little fidgety. So that's when I say this is a beginner project, but a little fidgety. You're going to need some pins and a little patience to do the letters that have the holes in the middle. So once we have these 3 pieces, we can get started putting this project together. Now I'm going to take one of my D letters and I am going to fold under just by about 3/8 of an inch or so the short end. Now I'm going to place this right sides together, and we can start anywhere on our D. I'm going to start here on the bottom, and I'm just going to place a pin. We are going to take our gusset and we are going to ease this gusset all the way around our D shape. And we're going to use a fair number of pins in this to make sure that we are easing this so that it fits nice and tight. Now you could use bias binding on this if you choose, but this is a kind of a sweeping curve here, so you don't really need to use bias binding for this. You can just use a straight of grain cut. Now, once I get to the corner here, I'm just going to make a little corner turn here. You could, if you wanted to, clip this corner clip it just right here and then continue on with the fabric. It's really up to you. And I'm just going to head down this side. Now, once I get to the bottom, I'm going to once again just turn a corner, and there's going to be just a corner edge there. But again, you could clip that corner and move on. Now I cut this a little bit longer than I had intended. So I'm just going to take my scissors and cut this down just a little bit shorter. And I'm going to fold my raw edge right along there so that when I stitch it, we're not going to have any raw edges on the outside of our fabric, as you can see. Now I'm going to head over to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to stitch all the way around this D, and then we're going to start working on the center cutout of our project. So let's head over to the sewing machine and take care of this. Here we are at the sewing machine, and I am just going to stitch carefully around this D because it's not really that big. I would urge you maybe to make a little bigger of a project than this one. And I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And I have my 1/4 inch foot on my machine, so it's going to make this a breeze just to do the 1/4 inch seam. Now when I get to the corner, I'm going to stop. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, move that fabric out of the way, and head straight up. And it's the same once I get to this corner. I'm going to move that fabric out of the way. And we're just heading down the curve now. And take your time if you don't have a lot of experience with this, and remove those pins as you go along. You don't want to ruin your machine. And now we here are at the bottom. And as you can see, we have a nice pointy tip at the top of our D. And a nice curved edge. Around the front of the D. So now let's go back over to the workstation and go on to our next step. Now here we are back at our workstation. And as you can see, we have our gusset on our D, and it's beginning to take shape into our 3D letter that we're looking to have. But before we attach the back side of our D, we need to work on this inner gusset. So we're going to go back and we are going to take our smaller piece of our gusset and fold down the raw edge in the same way that we did for the larger piece. And again, we are going to place this right sides together, and I'm just going to do the same way that I did on this D. And I'm going to pin all the way around this inner D. Now this again is a little fidgety because it's smaller, and the bias binding or a 3-inch strip cut on the bias is probably a little bit better for this, but this will work just fine for what we need. And again, I'm using quite a few pins here. And once I get to the corner, I want to make sure that I have a nice corner turn. Head down the side. Again, fold our short end so that we have a nice fold and we don't have any raw edges. And now you can see we have the inner gusset. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew the inner gusset to this so that it starts to look like a 3D D, just the way we want it to look. So let's head back over to the sewing machine and tackle this. And again, it's a little fidgety, but I know you can do it. Now here we are back at the sewing machine, and I am stitching together this inner gusset. And keep in mind that you need to keep these other parts of this gusset and the exterior fabric away from each other. And it's a little fidgety here because of how small it is. But we're going to give this a go and see how that goes. So let's start. And now we have finished our smaller gusset, and we're going to head over to the workstation and move on to our next step. Okay, so now we have our gusset on both our main D and our little d, that is the hole in the middle of our D. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add our back side of our D. And as we can see, once we place this right sides together, our D's are going to be matching, which is exactly the reason why we needed to have them going in opposite directions when we first cut them out. So I'm going to just find our corner here and pin this. Lots of pinning in this project. Same for this side. I'm just going to find my corner and pin. And pin along the edge. And then we're just going to pin the outer part of our D, which is the curved part. Making sure that's all lined up. Now once we get this pinned, I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch this together. I'm not going to show you how to do this on the sewing machine because we just did it. And then we will move on to our next step. So let me just stitch this on real quick and we will move on to our next step. Okay, so now we have our both sides of our D stitched, but now we have to stitch our rest of our gusset. Now, this seems like it would be an easy process. In other words, you would think that you would just stitch this to the wrong side, to the right sides of this so that it looks like a D. The problem is, if you do that, you won't be able to turn it right sides out. So what we're going to do is we are going to manipulate this fabric a little bit so that we will be able to turn this right sides out and it will look like a D. Now, in order for us to get this gusset to work correctly, this inner gusset, we are going to have to take it, knot and do the intuitive thing, which is to push it through and make it right sides together. Instead, we are going to fold the far side all the way across and place it right sides together with the far side of the right side of the inner part of the D. And we're actually going to sew this in 2 steps. We're going to stitch the far side first, and then we're going to stitch the near side. So you can see, I know this is a little fidgety and it's probably difficult to see on the video, but we have the far side raw edge and the far side of the inner D main fabric right sides together. And we're just going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch these. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and stitch these right sides together, and I'll be right back. Here we are back at the sewing machine, and as you can see, I have my pin line right here. And I'm just going to manipulate my fabric so that I have a straight line that I can stitch right along that pin line. And I'm going to take out these pins as I go along so I don't ruin my machine. Now I'm going to stop here. We're going to go back over to the workstation and we are going to repin the other side of our gusset and then finish off the inner gusset part of our project. Now that I've done the one side, I am going to flip it over so that I can do the other side. And as you can see, we have this raw edge and this raw edge, and we are just going to join these together. And I'm just going to pin these. And we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch this. I'm not going to show you how to do this because we just did it on the other side, but we're going to come back to the workstation and we're going to finish up this project. Now we've stitched both sides of our gusset, so all we have to do is reach inside and turn this right sides out. And we're going to do that through the opening that's left between the two short edges that we folded under. So I'm just going to pull this out, right sides out, and see whether or not we've succeeded in doing our gusset. And there we have it. We have our 3D looking D here with our hole in the middle. And now all we need is some polyester fiberfill, and we're going to fill up this D using our fiberfill. And you can fill this up as much as you want or as little as you want. You just want to get that 3D look for your project. Now, you are not going to wash this project because this is going to be all sealed up, and if you do, your fiberfill is likely to get all damaged and bunched up, and your pillow will no longer look the way that you would like it to. So what we're going to do is we are going to just stuff this. I'm going to use my ruler here to help me out. I used to have a nice chopstick that I would use for this, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. I'm sure it's somewhere in my mess that I call a sewing room. But for now, this ruler will do just fine. And as you can see, our 3D stuffed letter D is starting to take shape. Now keep in mind that if you are doing other letters that don't have a hole, they're a lot easier to do and a lot quicker to do than ones that have a hole inside. You don't have to worry about that inner gusset. There we have it. There's our letter D. Now I'm just going to take a needle and thread, because we have this opening here at the bottom, and we also have the same opening on the gusset. And I'm just going to use some ladder stitch to stitch along the bottom here to secure that so that our stuffing doesn't come out. Now I'm not going to show you how to do that on the video, because there are plenty of videos online that will teach you how to do ladder stitch, but it's just an invisible stitch that will enclose this without it looking like there are any stitches at all. And otherwise, we have finished with our beautiful stuffed letter, and now we have the letter D along with our other letters that we have. We could do a whole alphabet if we wanted to. These are a fun little project to make, great for kids, great for decor in your sewing room, like I did. Fun little projects to make. And this D with the inner gusset, like I said, it's a little bit harder than, say, the E or the W or the S in sew, but it's doable and you can do it too. Thank you for joining me today here at Sew Very Crafty. And if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and ding that bell for notifications so that you can get future notifications of other Sew Very Crafty videos. And if you want more sewing and crafting projects that aren't on the YouTube channel, head over to www.sewverycrafty.com and you can see everything that I'm doing over there, including some recent quilting projects. If you're a quilter, I'm just starting out, but I'm learning quickly and have done a few quilting projects over at the website. Maybe someday I'll do them here on the YouTube channel, but for now, we're doing some nice beginner and intermediate sewing projects like this one today. So thanks again for joining me, and I will see you all again next time. Bye.